Let's take a look at the past, present, and future of human relations. Properly called organizational behavior and rooted in the behavioral sciences, the science of human relations was developed in the late 1940s. It is based primarily on psychology, which attempts to determine why individuals behave the way they do, and sociology, which attempts to determine how group dynamics affect organizational performance. Social psychology, economics, and political science have also contributed to organizational behavior. During the 1950s, research in human behavior was conducted in large organizations. By the late 1970s, organizational behavior was recognized as a discipline in its own right, with teachers, researchers, and practitioners being trained in organizational behavior itself. Organizational behavior is a social science that was built in a knowledge base on a sound foundation of scientific theory and research. Human relations takes a practical, applied approach. It attempts to anticipate and prevent problems before they occur to solve existing problems of interpersonal relations in organizations. In early America, most people worked on farms and were self employed in occupations such as tailors, carpenters, shoemakers, and blacksmiths. Then, during the Industrial Revolution, people left the farms to work in factories that were privately owned. These businesses were concerned with profits, not employees, and managers viewed people only as a source of production. Most of the early owner managers gave little thought to the working conditions or health, safety, and other terms and conditions of employment for their employees. Frederick Taylor, an engineer known as the father of scientific management, focused on analyzing and redesigning jobs more effectively in the late 1800s and early 1900s, which led to the idea of mass production. Scientific managers focused on production, not people. They assumed that workers always acted rationally and were motivated simply by money. Also, Taylor failed to recognize the social needs of employees and placed them in isolated jobs. In 1800, Robert Owen was considered the first manager and entrepreneur to understand the need to improve the work environment and the employee's overall situation. In 1920, Owen was called the real father of personnel administration. He believed that profit would be increased if employees worked shorter hours, were paid adequately, and were provided with sufficient food and housing. He refused to employ children under the age of 11 and improved working conditions. Other entrepreneurs of the time did not follow his ideas. From the mid 1920s to the early 1930s, Elton Mayo and his associates from Harvard University conducted research at the Western Electric Hawthorne plant near Chicago. The research conducted through the Hawthorne Studies has become a landmark in the human relations field. In fact, Elton Mayo is called the father of human relations. As a consequence of these studies, the Hawthorne effect was discovered. The Hawthorne effect refers to an increase in performance caused by special attention given to employees, rather than tangible changes in the work. During the research, Mayo changed the lighting and ventilation in a production facility. To his surprise, performance went up regardless of the working conditions. Through interviews, Mayo realized that the control group during the research felt important because of all the attention they got. Studies have shown that happy workers are usually, but not always, more productive than unhappy workers. During the Depression in the 1930s, unions gained strength and often forced management to look more closely at the human side of the organization and meet employees' needs for better working conditions, higher pay, and shorter hours. During the 1940s and 1950s, other major research projects were conducted in a number of organizations. Some of the research was conducted by the University of Michigan and the Ohio State University, both of which conducted studies in leadership and motivation. During the 1970s, interest in human relations peaked. By the late 1970s, the term human relations was primarily replaced with the more commonly used term organizational behavior. In the 1980s, the US rate of productivity was much lower than that of Japan. William Auchi discovered that a few particularly successful firms did not follow the typical US model. After years of research and investigation, Auchi developed Theory Z. Theory Z integrates common business practices in the United States and Japan into a middle ground framework appropriate for use in the United States. In the 1990s, the trend towards increased participation of employees as a means of improving human relations and organizational performance continued. This trend included greater levels of participation at the lowest levels of the organization. As a result, employees have more input into management decisions and how they perform their jobs. The use of groups and teams also became popular in the 1990s and continues today. We've discussed the history of human relations. Now let's briefly discuss its current and future trends and challenges. Chief executive officers rate globalization as the top challenge to business leadership in the 21st century. The trend towards globalization has clearly changed the speed at which and the way we do business today. Organizational behavior will continue to be an important factor in organizational performance and results.